Hi, I'm Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. This is part 3 of the applique tutorial series. In part 1, we defined what is applique in the first place. Part 2, we learned about the tools that I like to use so that you too could purchase those if you choose to help you be successful in learning how to make a quilt just like this. In part 3, we're going to learn a really important step of how to actually prepare the templates, and we're going to be using freezer paper for that. Again, I don't prefer the store-bought, but rather the Jenkins freezer paper. It's just a lot thicker and it doesn't tend to curl with heat like some of the other freezer paper does. So let's get started on that process. This is a really important step now, because just keep in mind that the actual shape that you see here is a result of the template that you prepare. So we can't take this step too lightly. It's a really important piece of the overall success of applique. So with your pattern, or say you're in the block of the month, you will then bring out the actual pattern for the particular month that you're working on. And again, we'll be making one of the mittens in block 4 here. So there's the image of the actual block, and inside are the diagrams. We will not be making the snowflake. I certainly didn't do that by applique, but rather we die cut those out of wool felt, and that's part of an embellishing kit that is part of our block of the month program. Or if you want to choose your own fabrics, it's an embellishing kit that you can purchase separately. So we'll be using the Jenkins freezer paper. And I want to show you there's a shiny side. I think you can see that. And there's a dull side. And your instinct is going to be to actually draw on the dull side. It's not intuitive to trace on the shiny side. The reason we're going to trace on the shiny side is that way our design is not reversed in orientation. So we will start by, I'll just trace this one here. And notice on the pattern piece, you see a number 1 here, a 2, and a 3. What that's letting you know is when you actually place these pieces down to the background, you'll start with this piece first, followed by the cuff, which is second, followed by the little zigzag trim, which is third. All of our applique patterns are laid out that way, so you're not trying to visualize which piece goes down first and second and so on and so forth. It's pretty simple here because there's only 3 pieces, but in other blocks that say have 30 or 40 pieces, it's not as intuitive. So you make sure you use the numbering system to make sure that you put the pieces down properly when you get to that step, but we'll be reviewing that later. So let's lay our pattern piece flat. This is where you'll use that Sharpie marker that we talked about before. The shiny side is up, and I will start with tracing my mitten. Now, any piece that's layered behind has a dashed line on our pattern. Like right up here where this cuff is, you can see this dashed line right here. I am similarly going to just dash that line so it reminds me that edge will not be turned under, because it wouldn't make sense to turn this edge under since the cuff is going to lay over top of that. Not only is it work that I don't really need to do, but then it creates a little bit of a bump. So for several reasons, we won't be turning that edge under. So that's the first one. Then the cuff, and then the zigzag. Okay. There's my edge, and there's my edge there. Now, again, this is only 3 pieces, so it's pretty easy to go, okay, that's the mitten, this is the cuff, and that's the trim. But in other quilts or in other blocks where pieces aren't as obvious, I like to now go on the flat side, the non-shiny side, and actually write that pattern piece number. So the mitten was number 1, the cuff was number 2, and the zigzag was number 3. This will be helpful again in patterns that have a lot more pieces and you're looking at that piece going, what is that? I don't even remember what piece that was, and saves you time. So now that we've traced our shapes out, I'm actually going to use a second piece of freezer paper. I'm going to trim away this part because I like to save my freezer paper. I don't want to waste it. So I'm going to trim this away right now. I'm going to get a second piece of freezer paper. Why am I getting a second piece of freezer paper? As you can see right now, that's not real sturdy. If I cut this out and iron this down and try to turn the edge, any kind of pulling would probably wrinkle my paper and I wouldn't have that nice crisp edge. So for that reason, I always make my template with 2 sheets, tracing on 1, okay? Now watch, I'm going to put the shiny side down, and I'll trim this piece too so I don't waste, I don't like to waste this stuff. Put that off to the side for a future project. So shiny side down, and I'm actually going to put the blank one shiny side down. The reason for that is, let's say that I'm using a light colored fabric, which this is pretty light colored. I really don't want that pen in contact with my fabric. So this would work to have the drawn side down. However, since that will be coming in contact with my fabric, I really don't want to do that and take that risk. So I'm going to do a little bit of a switch. The plain piece will be shiny side down first, and the drawn piece will be shiny side down. Do not be tempted to go shiny side to shiny side. They will stick, but it's not going to be the result you want. You'll see what I mean shortly. Shiny side down with the plain, shiny side down with the drawn. And you can use a regular iron, or you could use your sealing iron for this step. I like to start in the middle and spread the heat out so I don't get bubbles. So let's start with that. One of the first things that I do when I get ready to applique is start heating up my iron. And I use the Hobbyco iron on the full hot setting. Now if I were, let's say had a big piece, a big pumpkin, or in this particular quilt, you know, maybe the house, I would not be using the Hobbyco sealing iron for this. I would have my regular iron and ironing board just to get it done faster. But just for convenience, I'll use the sealing iron for this. And it's not very big, so it works out. So I want to make sure that the 2 pieces are secure to each other and there are no bubbles. Now the neat thing about the freezer paper is, you're probably wondering, now isn't this permanently stuck to this? And the answer is no. It can come up and go down repeatedly. Okay. So now that the 2 pieces are together, I can see the drawn line faintly, but I can see it. For that reason, you can see now why I use the Sharpie pen. If I had used just a regular pen, it doesn't work well on the waxy surface, but even then, you just can't see it. So you do want to use a Sharpie pen so you can see now where you're going to cut. Now cutting, I like to use the big scissors to do the main cut, and if I'll do any little sub cuts, which we'll do probably later on with the actual fabric, I use the smaller scissors. When you cut this out, remember, what you cut is how your shape is going to look on your quilt. So don't rush this process. Don't think that you can kind of do just a rough cut. It needs to be precise. And I've learned that when cutting, rather than taking short, choppy cuts like this, take longer strokes so that you just cover more distance. So let's get started. So I'm going to take as big of a bite as I can, and instead of turning the scissors, I like to turn the paper. I'm trying to be as smooth as possible because I know that my fabric that will be turning around this edge is going to look exactly like the shape I cut out right now with my scissors. If there's a little bobble on your template, there'll be a little bobble on your applique piece. And I already see I have a little bobble I got, but I'll address that when I'm done with this cut. And that's my dash line. Rather than me cutting on the line, which would then lose my ability to see that it's dashed, I'm going to cut just outside that line so that when I see it, I'm reminded, oh, don't turn that edge under. Now I had a little bit of a bobble down here, just ever so slightly. You know, that happens in real life. You just get a little bit off. So I look at my piece, I think I'm satisfied with that, and I will of course go and cut my other pieces out just the same. I'll save time not doing that on camera with you. So now we've learned the important process of how to make templates using 2 layers of freezer paper. The main thing I want you to remember is shiny side down to shiny side down, and remember to put the drawn piece sandwiched in the middle. I really don't want that on the bottom, especially if you're using a white fabric. That Sharpie pen, while it's supposed to be permanent, you're mixing that with the spray starch, and you could have colors running, so we don't really want to do that. So join me next. Now that we've got the templates all set, now we bring out the fabric and we're going to learn how to actually iron the template down to the fabric and start turning that edge under.